The Joint Forces engineering teams demine key areas in new liberated areas in Hodeidah. The United Nations warns that fighting in Ma'rib deepens displacement situation in the city. In violation of the international law, Houthi rebels continue to recruit children and send them to war fronts. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Shazad Abdelbey. The Joint Forces engineering teams expanded survey in new liberated areas to include citizens' homes, farms, schools, and all public facilities. This step comes after a discovery of mines inside a mosque in a village southwest of the city of Hais in Hodeidah. The team said the Houthi militia turned the Hais district into a land of minefields. Military officials said the Houthi militia blew everything behind them, pointing out that the new liberated areas need a lot of efforts and time to clear them so that their people can return to their homes and live in safety. The engineering teams of the Joint Forces removed hundreds of mines and explosive devices planted by the Houthi militia in separate areas north of Hais.
As you can see, these large quantities of mines and explosive devices were removed by the 1st and the 2nd teams in the Brigade of Missions and the Joint Forces. These were removed from several villages in Hais and Al-Garahi. The Houthi militia planted these explosives in schools, roads and farms. They would have resulted in a human catastrophe.
Forces made new field progress in Hais district in Hodeidah, southwest of Yemen. The military media of the Joint Forces reported that their forces liberated new positions and took control of Al-Ran village west of Hais. The Joint Forces continued their field progress amid collapse of the Iranian-backed Houthi elements. The clashes resulted in the killing and wounding dozens of the militants and destroying their vehicles and military equipment. The Humanitarian Action Cell of the National Resistance launched the second phase of humanitarian aid to liberated areas in Hais.
Today, we launched the second food aid convoy presented from the humanitarian cell of the National Resistance to the liberated areas in Hais. The number is around 6,000 food baskets.
Recent developments in the West Coast have a great impact on civilians, who are the most vulnerable out of the conflict. A new United Nations report has warned that thousands of families have fled their homes to look for safer places. More on the story is within this report.
Recent developments in the west coast of Yemen call into attention the impact on civilians, who are the most vulnerable out of the conflict. Reports by the Executive Unit for Internally Displaced Persons on the humanitarian situation in the west coast revealed that in November, some 1,014 families, which make about 7,098 people, were displaced from various areas in Hodeidah Governorate to Al-Khoukhah city, south of Hodeidah. 341 other families that make some 2,287 people were displaced further south to Al-Mukha district in the neighboring Taiz Governorate. In November 2, the Supreme Council of the Management and Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reported that at least 455 families, or more than 3,000 people, were displaced from Hais district northwards to Jarrah and to Hodeidah, while some 147 other families were displaced northeast to Jabal Ras district as a result of the recent hostilities in Hais district. Hostilities in Hais closed one of the major south-north commercial routes, the route running from Aran through Al-Mukha to Hais and from there to Ib and other areas in the north, has become a vital artery for commercial traffic and the transport of humanitarian assistance from Aran port to northern governorates. According to field reports, hundreds of trucks carrying commercial supplies have in recent days been observed waiting along the route in Al-Mukha and Al-Khoukhah as fighting has interrupted traffic into Hais. The interruption of traffic along this route might have dire humanitarian consequences if it continues, according to reports. On the other hand, field reports indicated that the route connecting Hodeidah to Sanaa governorates has been partially opened for civilians traffic. In the meantime, limited civilian movement and demining activities have been reported along the coastal route connecting Hodeidah city to Ad-Durayhimi, Bayt al-Faqih and At-Tuhaidah district.
Battles continue on the fronts of Ma'rib between government forces backed by the tribes on one side and the Houthi militia on the other. According to military sources, violent clashes broke out in separate locations on the southern and western fronts of Ma'rib. The sources said the battles resulted in the death and injury of dozens of Houthi militia. Human Rights Watch has warned of a new wave of civilian displacement caused by Houthi shelling in Ma'rib. Human Rights Watch called on the Iran-backed group to immediately end the shelling. HRW said civilians and displaced people in Ma'rib have been caught in crossfires for about 2 years. It said Houthis' repeated attack on civilian areas and blocking of humanitarian aid have become a shameful pattern and add to the group's miserable human rights record. The coalition in Yemen announced it carried out 15 operations against the Houthi militia in Ma'rib and Al-Jawf during the past 24 hours. The statement of the coalition confirmed that these operations destroyed 9 military vehicles and eliminated 110 terrorist elements. The coalition announced that it monitored hostile movements and activities of the Iran-backed Houthi militia at Sanaa International Airport. The coalition said it had spotted a drone that had flown into Yemen from Sanaa International Airport. It stressed that using Sanaa Airport as a military base is a grave violation of international humanitarian law. Last week, the Arab coalition accused the Houthis of turning the airport in Sanaa into a military facility by testing an air defense system there. Clashes continued between the joint forces and Houthi militia northwest of Al-Dala. Military sources indicated that confrontations took place in the areas of Batar sector, northwest of the governorate, indicating that they expanded towards the neighboring sectors. Children are the bright future for any country. The case is not the same in Yemen, with Houthi recruiting children and sending them to war zones, despite the international pressure on them to stop such criminal acts. More on the story is within this report.
The war in Yemen has taken away the childhood of thousands of boys and girls and destroyed their chances to live in a sustainable peace community. Grave violations against children are alarmingly increasing, while the COVID-19 pandemic increased the children's vulnerability to recruitment and abduction. A campaign was launched on Twitter under the hashtag Children Not Guns to support children in Yemen and to address the global conscience to pressure the Houthis to end the flagrant violations against childhood. According to UNICEF, armed groups are required by international humanitarian law to take measures to protect civilians, including children who are particularly vulnerable during times of war. Civilians must never be the target of attacks. According to the United Nations report, the attacks on hospitals and schools remain excessively high. Schools are being used for military purposes, as the temporary closure of schools during the pandemic made them easy targets for military occupation and usage. In the end, children need to be given an alternative to violence and abuse. They need peace, respect for child rights, and democracy. Officials need to act to build a future where peace prevails. Please give children that alternative.
Coming next. Our Man, a charity that gives hope to poor families and displaced women.
اضطرينا نحن نغادر من ذي ونزحنا.
الله يستنقلكم يا محويتني، لا الله يستنقل.
Welcome back. The war in Yemen affected all Yemenis, not only physically but mentally. Atrocities of the war plus Houthi violence have hit strongly on people. More on the story is within this report.
Hassan al-Jaber, in his 40s, went through the experience of entering the Central Reformatory Association in Taiz for a whole year. This puts him in a state of mental disorder, after which he spent more than a quarter of his life here in the psychiatric and neurological hospital. The psychiatric patient experiences other setbacks from time to time due to the deterioration of his psychological condition, the scarcity of capabilities.
I am here since 13 years. We drink tea without sugar, only tea and water. I didn't eat anything cooked, no beans or bread inside the hospital. I talk frankly, there is no good nutrition. If we talk about clothes, we don't have clothes. As to medicine, there is no medicine.
Hassan and Tariq are two of the 165 psychiatric patients lying in the hospital, the only institution in Thailand that deals with their treatment. They experience psychological crises and a bitter reality. The numbers of patients are increasing as a result of the continuation of war.
The budget for food, medicine and furnishing is hardly enough. It's a problem and it leads to our inability to provide adequate services to the patient. We call through your channel anyone who is able to give support for food, medicine or clothing or furnishing to swiftly give us support in order to provide the service.
There is in fact a direct relationship between the continuation of war in Yemen and the rise in the number of people with mental illness. This number cannot be handled by the hospital that is unable to provide the necessary needs for patients in food, medicine, clothing. 25% of those needs are not provided because of the weak operating budget of the hospital.
As to the medical staff, they migrated. They left the hospital in search for better opportunities. We can't blame them for doing that. Who can be working in such an environment that is surrounded by shells, snipers, and high prices?
The psychiatric and neurological hospital suffers from a severe shortage in the number of specialized doctors. At the hospital works with only 3 doctors. This makes it unable to provide medical services as required in a governorate whose population exceeds 3 million people.
Our Man Association is a charity society that helps women in Aden since 2015. The charity helps women through providing small projects that enable them to secure a living in the time of war. More on the story is within this report.
After a long journey of ignorance, Meher found her opportunity to achieve what she aspired to and her present desire to learn. And this is what she achieved after joining Armen Development Center.
Thank God we have benefited a lot from education. At first, we were illiterate. We didn't know anything. Our children come back from school and we have no idea what they've learned. Now we started to open our eyes to new things and know what they learned. We know the alphabets and many other things.
Meher wasn't the only one who achieved her dream of learning. There are those who have made their careers with confident steps towards education and acquiring skills for the benefit of themselves and their families.
I came to Arman Institution to improve my situation. I learned many things about sewing. I started working as a tailor, and now I'm a trainer in this place. We work with government and public schools, trying to improve our living.
Armen Foundation is one of the most prominent development charity institutions, which dates back to 2015 in Aden as a community organization, aimed at supporting poor families developing small projects and working on the development of women and children, with attention to people with special needs.
This institution has many goals. We're focusing on different aspects to serve women, people with disabilities, and children. We intensified with the current projects providing many different services. We call it seasonal projects that the areas need. Some of our visits were conducted to meet the needs of women. Children were deprived from education, especially in nurseries. So we opened a free nursery with more than 50 students capacity. All of them are marginalized and disabled children, whom their parents have limited source of income and cannot afford paying school fees.
In view of the economic conditions that the country is going through, the deteriorating education conditions and the dropout of children from schools, Armen Foundation sought to open a space to attract many children and return them to schools to continue their education. Many goals and multiple services that Armen Developmental Foundation is keen to provide, and it was able to achieve the aspirations of many people who joined it. Concerted efforts are required to support the organization and their activities to continue its projects of charity and giving.
The European Union renewed its calls for an urgent action to maintain safer floating tanker off the coast of Hodeidah to avoid an imminent disaster in the Red Sea.
Alarmed by the lack of progress to prevent an unprecedented disaster. The Safar could leak 4 times the amount of oil that leaked from the Exxon Valdez in 1989.
All actors are accountable to the Yemeni people, to the region, to the world. Inaction is no longer an option. There is no time to lose.
National Committee of Coronavirus announced 6 new cases of the COVID-19 in 3 governorates. With the current updates, the total confirmed cases are 9,987, including 1,946 deaths and 6,845 cases of recovery. Here's a reminder of the main headlines. The Joint Forces engineering teams demine key areas in new liberated areas in Hodeidah. The United Nations warns that fighting in Ma'rib deepens displacement situation in the city. In violation of the international law, Houthi rebels continue to recruit children and send them to war fronts. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching.